Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Ending the Year on a Positive Note, Reflection Practices, Goal Setting and Creating a Culture of Gratitude. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Hope Zelli, Community Ambassador at Westfield Health, and today we're joined by a fantastic panel of experts, Mark Pinches and Darren Vine. Mark, can you kick us off with a quick introduction, please?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Nice to be able to join you again. So, yeah, I'm Mark Pinches, head of coaching here at Westfield Health. So, my background, I'm a psychologist and physiologist, but I work as a performance coach and have done for many years. And yeah, hopefully, I will bring to the table some experiences that I've had in various fields with a psychology and a physiology angle. So, looking forward to it.
Thank you. And Darren?
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name's Darren Vine. I'm a lead wellbeing coach at Westfield Health. I've been working at the company for about 6 years now, and my previous experiences, I've got about 18 years education background, 10 of which were in a leadership role. And then I've also got experience as a professional sports person and elite sports coach for over 20 years. So hopefully, like Mark, I'm going to bring some experience to the table today to really help support what we're talking about today.
That's great. So before we hear any more from our panel, I'm just going to go through a few housekeeping points. The webinar is being recorded and you'll receive a recording shortly afterwards by email. You've joined in listen-only mode so nobody can see or hear you. You can ask our panel any questions using the questions box. We love hearing from you and we'll try and answer as many as we can. You'll see some resources that you can download in the materials section. During the webinar, we'll be taking a poll to include audience members' experiences. This is completely anonymous and optional, but we will share the overall results. And a survey will appear on your screens at the end of the webinar, and it would be great if you could give your feedback as this helps us shape future webinars. So today's webinar is all around ending the year on a positive note and how we can utilise reflection practices, goal setting and company initiatives to create a culture of gratitude. It's so important to create a positive and supportive work environment that encourages employees to reflect on the challenges and successes of the past year, as well as cultivating a mindset of gratitude and proactive goal setting for personal and professional growth as the new year approaches. By building a culture based on gratitude, reflection, and open feedback, organisations and team leaders can enhance employee engagement, resilience, and overall satisfaction. This approach not only acknowledges employees' hard work, but also promotes a healthy, forward-thinking workplace dynamic. So in January 2024, we asked over 2,000 people in the UK about their attitudes to mental health, their job and the wellbeing support that they receive at work. 4 in 5 people felt that their worries about external issues were affecting their mental health. We're hopeful for some better outcomes in next year's survey, and we wanted to use this webinar to provide some tools to help achieve those outcomes. So let's kickstart things with a poll to look at any common themes with wellbeing goals for 2025. So looking ahead to 2025, what are your top wellbeing goals? Is it increasing employee engagement with wellbeing initiatives, gathering and implementing employee feedback, building or aligning wellbeing goals into the wider company goals, not yet decided, or anything else that you'd like to share in the chat box? I can see here that a lot of you are keen to increase your employee engagement with wellbeing initiatives. That's great. That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your wellbeing goals. Like I said, the top one looks to be increasing employee engagement, so hopefully we'll be able to help you with that today. So let's get started with our first question to the panel. We're going to start with how you can build a gratitude-based workplace culture through reflection and gratitude sessions and workshops. So how can team leaders encourage employees to reflect on both their successes and challenges in a constructive way?
Well, I think it's really important that this is built into schedules and practices within the workplace, because I think if we don't allocate sufficient time for reflection in the workplace, I think it just kind of misses the mark. If we do it in an ad hoc way, it's very easy for life and work to kind of get in the way and kind of mean that we skip over it and we don't give it the time that it needs to really have that impactful, kind of, well, I suppose, impact on this, on whatever it is that we're trying to do. And I think it's very much very, very important that it's seen to employees that this is a valued practice within the workplace as well. Again, it's something that if we don't see our leaders doing that, and we don't have that culture where we think, well, actually, this is an important thing, and this is something that can really help not just develop me as a person, but also contribute towards the wider picture in terms of the organization itself, then again, I think it falls short a little bit. But I think it's also really important as well that when people are given that opportunity to reflect in the workplace, that they feel safe doing so, feeling like, if it's, for example, surveys and feedback and kind of, really contributing to the whole processes that are going on, that people feel that safety, that they are valued, they are appreciated, their views and their contributions will be deemed to be as important and impactful as well. So I think that's really important.
Absolutely. No, I agree with Jen. One thing I think as well, we seem to allocate times, don't we, where we have a feedback process and we need to think, here we are going into a reflective period, the holiday season, etc. It's interesting if we do it at certain times and the gap between each one is sufficiently long, I think the impact or the effect of it tends to diminish. And in fact, if you look at it from a psychological point of view, we are geared up to actually reflect on a very regular basis. So, for example, if you look at daily reflection, and even down to sort of working in cycles, and anyone who's listened to me before will know that I'm very much for working in ultradian sprints. Our reflection period should be actually even down to sort of every hour or so. We get a change in hemispheric dominance, where our brain actually is going into a mode of slowing down and reflecting on what we've just done to see how that would be useful for the next period that we'll go into. So I think smaller cycles of reflection as we naturally ebb and flow are quite an important thing to do. But that's sort of two-way also. We need to reflect and to look at our successes and challenges as an individual and as a team. And first of all, I suppose, Socrates said a couple of 1,000 years ago, above all, know thyself. And the idea is that the whole start point is as being introspective and to say, what have I just done over the last hour or so? How did that work? Did it fit in with some set of values or something that I have in my own sort of plan, if you like? Did it work? What do I take forward? What do I drop? And if we are supposed to be doing it on a frequent basis, let's not wait, for a time of the year or whatever, or 6 months reappraisals as people have. Let's just bring it down to an individual and a team effort connection on a regular basis. And it's something that we bring into business a long time ago. Look at Kaizen, which is the Japanese philosophy of continuous improvement. It's saying let's analyze what we've just done and see if we can improve on it. And that really can be applied to a well-being sense as well. So and the good experience and the not so good experiences will teach us something. If we've only got a culture in our organization where we're reflecting on what's good, what was going well, that's fine, but there's missed opportunity. Oh no, we don't think about and talk about the things that didn't go well. We learn just as much for that. Nietzsche famously said 150 years ago, that we reflect on all things, and if it didn't go very well, and even if it was quite traumatic, we'll learn something from it. If it doesn't kill us, it makes us grow stronger. So I think regular reflection is important. Make sure that we reflect on what's good and also what we're grateful for. And I know we'll probably come and talk about that a little bit later, but what are the things that I'm pleased that happen? So regular assessment of those things is absolutely crucial. And that can be constructive, whether it's a good or bad outcome. Yeah.
I think as well, Mark, I think it's really important that we get to see those examples of best practice, and we get to see, this being modeled by our leaders and creating that culture within the organization where it can give people confidence to do this and to really do it well. Now, I think back to my teaching days, and I think about how we had a really well-structured and thorough process that was top-down. So it kind of started at the organizational level. The targets for the whole organization were filtered down into departments and then down to classroom teachers. And I think it was really good that we had that really structured time, like you say, on a regular basis where we could kind of discuss where we were, where we were at, how this fed into our own personal reflection targets, but also then upwards into departmental and then the whole school and even beyond that academy targets and goals. Now, that was, I suppose when I was in that at the time, I felt like it was a little bit like put on me. And I don't think it was as impactful for me as an individual because it felt like it was a little bit forced at times. So I think having a structure which is both balanced but impactful, but also complementary as well, and one where you feel like it is valued from everyone from the top to the bottom, I think is really important, because I think it's a real opportunity to build and embed a culture within an organization. But if we don't get it right and we just throw reflection out there and say, right, everyone go and reflect and this is how it feeds in, I think it can feel a little bit forced sometimes. So I think it's really important to get that balance between how it's communicated, how it's demonstrated, the kind of expectations off the back of it, I suppose, but also leaving it at that really personal level where the individual doing the reflection really sees the value, and also that will then feed upwards into the whole organization if it's done well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree entirely. Yeah, yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. So next, can you talk about any effective methods for leading a reflection session that balances discussing achievements and lessons learned?
hmm Yeah, well, I mean, looking at probably one of the things that springs to mind to begin with, years ago I was working with a council that had a lot of challenges, and what we decided was it was great to gather information with regard to how people felt. So you do surveys, and it's very, if you like, quantitative. We had percentages of that and percentages of this. But what happened, I suppose, as a successful intervention was that we said, let's use that information now to reflect on a more qualitative basis, because we want to know, yes, the facts and the figures, and we want to have the percentages, but we also want to have how people feel about it. So a qualitative, what does it mean? How does it make us feel? So what we included was a series of focus groups with like a diagonal cross section in the organization of some senior people. And I agree with you, Darren. I think, leadership, is as much as important as followership. We'll follow something that if the leaders in the organization are doing best practice, we want some leaders within that focus group, and we want people right the way through the organization that see it from a different way. And a number of sort of well-focused questions in a focus group, and there are very structured ways of running focus groups, I'm sure people have come across, but to run that with a diagonal cross-section across the organization will give us much better quality of information when it comes to making meaningful change, because it's how we feel about it will bring in what we would call emotional intelligence. In EQ, our emotional quotient, actually 4 times better predictor of team effort than would be IQ, interestingly enough. Daniel Goleman sort of highlighted this in the mid-90s with his groundbreaking book, Emotional Intelligence. So I think we've got to bring in people's emotions. And I think, as you said, Darren, if we can make it that it's psychologically safe for people to share their feelings, if we are able to, say without any fear of ridicule or, sort of negative feedback, this is how I feel about it, I think we get much better quality information that then we can actually use and move onwards and upwards, lessons learned. So always bring in a qualitative, what does it mean and how do people feel about it, but make it safe for people to do that. Yeah, I think, and make it a regular basis, as I said earlier on.
Definitely.
Yeah, pull out those key themes, that's always useful.
Yeah, yeah, no,
So
definitely.
can you advise on some simple ways to incorporate gratitude practices into daily or weekly routines in the workplace?
Again, I suppose if we look at things from an organizational level, it's kind of people getting recognition for what it is that they're doing, and that doesn't always have to be based on performance, based on targets, based on profits, outcomes, whatever it might be. I think a really important way of showing gratitude within an organization is making sure that people feel valued for their hard work, the effort they put into things. So it's not always kind of those headline figures and the performance targets and things. I think just emotional, like Mark says, in terms of that emotional intelligence kind of point of view, making people feel like they're valued, no matter what your position is within an organization, whether you're the CEO, whether you are the caretaker, whatever it might be, you all contribute towards that organization. And I think it's really important that we do recognize those things across the board, and whether that be peer gratitude, in terms of the employees, whether that be top down, whether that be bottom up. I think, like Mark says, that psychological safety, that if I am kind of, new to this organization, I can give gratitude to the CEO, and trying to make sure that those lines are blurred between people, and making sure that we can really pass that reward upwards, downwards, sideways, however which direction it goes, and making sure that that gratitude is worthwhile.
Yeah.
making sure that obviously it's feeding into those overall company goals, making sure that we can kind of link those things in where possible. But that's probably, in terms of gratitude, I'm not sure that's
Mm,
the most important thing. I think it's more about making the people feel valued, because then if we are judging off performance goals, long-term targets, profits, all those kind of things, the only way to
mm,
get the organization moving is to mobilize your people. And the way we can do
mm,
that is by showing that real level of gratitude to make people feel like they are
mm.
worthwhile within that organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, interesting. I mean, someone's made a comment. I think it follows on quite nicely from what you're saying there. But at what scale are we doing this? It's clear that obviously we're making a connection between all levels in an organisation, and hierarchical structures have a very definite way that they've been set up for many many years in terms of up and down, etc. But the most effective way of actually communicating is with people at our peer level, within teams, with organizations that have a closeness in terms of proximity and similarity in the way that people actually connect. So maybe the team ethos is an easier start point when it comes to showing the gratitude, to showing the positive connections, because people are closest to us, rather than going up and down. So I think a team ethos where we've got small, manageable size, units of optimal connection and optimal listening is a good place to start. It starts with us and who's nearest to me. It's almost like when we drop a pebble into the pond, the ripples go outwards. The most important effect is the ones that are closest to us, because we see it and we feel it, and the ripple comes from the proximity. By the time the effect sort of moves away from the center of the ripple, the pebble that was dropped, so we're starting to move away from the influence and the connection, certainly at an emotional level as well, I think. So, I think it's important to be able to make sure we do it at a manageable size. And, two people is a team, what's the connection there between showing gratitude, showing feedback, talking, opening up, having those crucial conversations. I think it's easier at that level. But when we do go up to higher levels, then I also think that there's scope to be able to show that there's that connection still there. The general, when they, sort of came and talked to the troops on the ground, didn't go and discuss tactics with them. They just came and say, hey, is the food all right? But the fact that he was a great general because he came and asked me how the food was, and the fact that there was a proximity and a closeness, that's important. Interesting, looking at an example of this in terms of practice. People ask for a connection with the senior people as well. So there was a very interesting story a few years ago that I actually started to do a sort of a survey subsequently with, where we gave people a scenario in a proper organization. We said, look, it's been a really busy week. This week has actually been a trial for us all. We pushed the boat out. We all worked extra hours, but we achieved it. Friday night comes along, or Friday just before we're supposed to close, and the idea was that the boss had a decision, A or B. Decision A was, should I stick an extra 20 quid in everybody's pay packet so they can go and have a pint on me to say thank you? Or option B was, should I finish half an hour early, go down on the shop floor, go into the office and just say, look, it's been a busy week, everyone. I'm grateful for your effort. We couldn't have done it without you. It hasn't gone unnoticed. And in fact, you've made a huge contribution. I just wanted to say thank you. So we asked people what way they would prefer, the 20 quid or the thanks. Consistently, people said they wanted just the thanks. They didn't want the money. The money, after you had a couple of pints on Friday night, would have, diminished in terms of the impact. But if the boss comes down and spends that time to actually say thank you face to face, consistently over 90% of people said option B was what they wanted. Okay. And we tried that in other organizations, and whatever the organization was, people consistently said, I just want people to say thank you and to show gratitude and to show thanks. And that didn't cost anything. So, these things needn't cost anything to say thank you and to be grateful. And we need to show them. We don't want to overdo it. We don't want to do too much because, it loses its value then, I think. But well-positioned thanks and gratitude in that hierarchical structure, but regularly between us at the same team level, is going to lubricate the process. That's going to allow us to be able to go through difficult times and challenges a little bit more effectively. So I think bring it down into the here and now and proximity, and do what humans do very well. We've sat around campfires only communicating with the people that are around that campfire for thousands of years, and we're very well suited to that. In the communication age, here we are. We can talk to people all over the place, but does it dilute the impact of that from a heartfelt thanks? think, as I say, good reflection in that respect, and connection is free. Yeah,
I think
that's my
I think
thought.
as well, Mark, just on that point as well, is people just want to feel recognised and recognise that feel seen. And I
Yeah,
think in the world the way it is now these days, I think when we, will probably be possibly, and I know some organisations have gone back to the office, but I remember sitting in the office and seeing the big bosses walking around and someone just tapping me on the shoulder and having a conversation, like you say, is fantastic. But I suppose it's how we then apply that same level of gratitude and that recognition and feeling seen when we're working online as well, if you're working from home. I think that brings its own challenges as well, doesn't it?
yeah, absolutely. It does. It can still be done. And hey, this is the age we're in now, and we're going to have to do that. It's not as good as sitting around the campfire and being connected, but you're right. We can still take time out to make that communication and to listen and
Yeah.
to use the technology, to our advantage in that respect. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, guys. So, do you have any practical tips for implementing psychological safety in the workplace?
Yeah, practical tips for psychological safety. I think at the end of the day, there's a genuineness and an authenticity in how I want it to be that comes out in my leadership role, or my communication with everybody. And I think on that basis, if I'm shown and seen to be, or showing and been seen to be authentic and to be genuine in my desire to talk, to communicate, to give that information out, I think it will be received well. So I think, search inwardly and ask the reasons why we're doing it. What are we doing that for? If we genuinely want to know and make people, feel that they are connected and that they are recognized, I think it'll come out. There's no clever recipe or anything that is a clever psychological route to get. I think genuineness and authenticity works every time. Yeah.
I think as well, setting clear parameters as well, and especially if this is a new journey the company's going on in terms of these things, and just letting people know and kind of slowly introducing things, but saying, well, this is how it's going to work. Any feedback that we receive is going to be used in the context that it was given. There aren't going to be ramifications if you say something that's kind of going to upset the apple cart a little bit. And I think
Mm.
from the top down, it's really accepting those views of people are all relevant as well. And I think that
Yeah.
knowing and seeing that in practice gives people that psychological safety as well. Just knowing that it is an open culture, it is something where I can really express my thoughts and my opinions, and it's going to be used constructively. And I think that's a powerful thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. So, next we're going to move on to exploring wellbeing surveys and employee feedback. So,
Mhm.
what are some effective strategies for gathering authentic employee feedback on wellbeing and workplace culture?
Okay, I'll take this if you like, Darren. A strategy obviously needs a structure. It needs a way of gathering genuine this authenticity, which I talked about with regard to feedback. Um, I think bite-sized pieces within the team level of connection and how it works there and what my impact is on the person next to me is something that we certainly did a program a few years ago, which was very successful. We called it the MAD program because MAD actually stood for Make a Difference. And what we did here was rather than try and make a contribution to a big picture, and it ties back quite nicely to this thing we're talking about, sort of hierarchical structures. What can I do to make a difference when it comes to that survey and that feedback, which is meaningful for me? And well, the people that are next to me, the people that I can feed back and say how it's working with me, seems to be much more manageable, and I can comprehend that rather than saying how I can feed back to a department or something that's happening somewhere in the organisation that I don't know. And I mean, I know we'll obviously only put information in that's relevant to us. But the MAD campaign was quite interesting because what we did was we made it a recognition, a reward for thinking about the next people, in your chain, if you like. So the survey, and particularly when it came to how can I make someone feel better, was based on energy transfer. Okay, so we know we manage our time, we all turn up at the same time, we have our meetings starting this time. But what about managing our energy? And if every one of us saw that there was an option that we had to put energy into those people in the chain of events that were happening in terms of our supply, whatever, and this is service or manufacturing, if I thought that I could make a difference to the next person in the chain by doing something that energizes them, it will make them feel well. It will make them feel better. the danger quite often in organizations when we are looking at, moving away from something we don't want, just, we've all got to work hard to make sure we achieve this, otherwise this will happen, is it creates a negativity which sucks people's energy away. We all know the people who, unfortunately, when we're connected with them, although they might be meaningful in terms of their instruction and their delegation, but sometimes delegation is offloading, isn't it? Means it takes my energy away. What can I do from a well-being perspective to put energy into the system? And how was it actually received? Was the feedback from an employee that was good practice, that made me feel good? And we asked them, and if it's psychologically safe for them to say, I felt good that you did that, this is going to actually be the lubrication that makes the system work much better. And I think it's a bite-sized piece to sort of have gratitude, which I can grasp. It's something that is tangible in terms of the people that are connected to me. And it can be a continuous improvement thing as well. So I think, that campaign, actually, we rewarded people by giving them a mug. And some people, I don't know, might be listening in today, might have come across, I still see them in organisations now as responsible for the NHS side of the business. And it was very successful in the NHS. And there were people going around with mugs saying, I've had a mad idea written on it. And there were some people who didn't have the mug, who didn't have ideas about how to connect with other people there. And they said, well, look, I'll come up with a simple bite-sized piece of connection, of injection of energy to get a mug and be the same as everyone else. And we all said, we've got ideas which help each other. You could extend that to what we call the QED campaign, which was probably better known in terms of the process for this continuous improvement. QED standing for quid each day. How can I save a quid each day in what I do? And I've got ideas because it's written on my mug. And we said bite-sized, if you like, benefits are going to give feedback as to a measurable outcome. We're saving money. We're actually being more efficient. We're making a difference. We're putting energy in, but with a very easy connection with the people that are next to us, or a very easy connection with what we're saving. And I think on that basis, it's having a realistic, almost a smart objective when it comes to, what we're trying to achieve here. We've got to get feedback, and the feedback was immediate. That's the key thing about this program, was that if somebody came up with an idea, it was logged straight away and it was acted upon. But we actually trained people to say, look, if it wasn't going to work just now, this is the way that you say thank you for your contribution, and it's not wasted. We wanted people to start the communication process. So it became a recognition campaign, and that allowed that feedback to be reflected upon and to make a difference in a measurable way. So, practical things out of that are still carried on now in different ways. I mean, we ran this years ago, but, it's logical, but we just need to bring it back down to the individual again,
I think sometimes as well, Mark, on that, I don't think you're always going to, at the start of these things, you're not always going to get everybody on board from the initial, in the initiative you start with. So I think it's really important, isn't it, that you kind of get those advocates and those people that believe in it, that will model and demonstrate these things as well. I think just disseminating that out as well to the wider population, and kind of then you'll start to get more. You might not get everybody on board, but getting the vast majority of the population on board is, again, it's a real powerful thing, isn't it, for how you can really get the organisation moving in a different direction.
Absolutely. Go for the middle part of the bell curve. You've got the people at the one end who will never actually want to do it, and you've got the people at the other end who will do it willingly, 100% of the time. Go for the majority of people, and if we have, if you like, an influencing, body of people, they'll pull everyone else along. And most people will want to do this. Most people will see the benefit and feel the benefit, and it creates almost like a sort of a momentum, a snowball effect. But there will be people who won't buy into it, and that's fine. Go for the influential group, which is actually usually the majority.
Definitely.
Yeah, off the back of that, do you have any suggestions about how to communicate the benefits of this approach to skeptical senior managers?
Yeah, interesting question. Yeah, well, there always will be, people who've moved in up the ladder. There've been people who've tried things out and it's worked for them, and by default, we all got different views of things. I think it's human nature is such that good practice and good connection and good listening skills and positivity and injecting in energy into people, rather than taking it away, is always going to pay dividends. And I think skeptical managers might be very transfixed on their sort of way of doing things, which rightly so has got them to a position. But look, we're in different times. I think what worked 10 years ago, what worked 15 years ago, and by default, senior managers would have taken some time to get there, and times change. We're in an age now where I think we should be open to new ways of doing things. Even Moore's law, which suggests that the speed of our progress in organizations is based on the power of our microchip and how fast, it can move information around, how much it can store. That's gone out the window now. Moore's law is no longer relevant because AI means that it's a lot faster than that, and the change curve is going up vertically. So I think senior managers have to be open to different ways of doing things. And I think, the danger is that we can be stuck in the dark ages, and I mean that in the nicest way. But, practices 10 years ago, maybe, if we've got a degree of skepticism about, how these things work, you know, are we in the perfect position at the moment? Is the organization working optimally? Are the changes that are going on outside our organizations, in terms of life and pandemics and all things, mean there's some scope to see things in a different way. So I think good managers now will be agile. They will think about new ways of doing things, and we can't have a foot in the past of, well, this is the way we've always done it. We become prisoners of familiarity, don't we? We've always done it that way. I know how do you communicate that? Well, again, if you see the main body of people moving forward in the organization because you're directing their attention to the majority, then it would be, and I mean this in the nicest way, but a fairly foolish, skeptical senior manager if they didn't see that move in the right direction is actually pleasing the majority. I can stand alone and say, hey, this is the way I should think it, but I'm a minority here. We should be open to new ways of doing things. So, yeah, I don't know.
It's like kind of like we said, isn't it, Mark? It's about that. You're not going to take everybody with you from the start. You've got to kind of target the people that you can. I think when you've got people that might be in positions like this, like you might call them block or whatever, however you want to describe them, but it's again showing them the benefits and showing them the bigger picture. And I think sometimes when we want to implement changes, we sometimes get caught up in the here and now too much about, well, this is going to mean harder, more work for me. It means I've got to do something that makes me feel uncomfortable. And I think sometimes it just needs people to reframe that situation a little bit and think, well, actually, let's look at the bigger picture here. Where's this going to take us? Where's this going to lead us? What are the benefits off the back of this once we can establish this? And I think if we put too much on people at the start and it's not something that they're very comfortable with, again, we're going to lose that impact straight away. So it's knowing your people, isn't it? Knowing your people, knowing who you can take along from the start, who you're going to have to kind of drag in and who you're going to have put that arm around and have that conversation with. But it's knowing the different approach. One approach isn't going to fit everybody here. So it's just kind of knowing your people, knowing how you can approach them, talk to them, communicate this information to them, and let them get there when they're ready to get there, because you can't force people to be doing these things, especially if it's, like you say, it's been deep rooted and established in old ways of doing things. It is going to take that little bit of time for people to maybe get up to speed. But then, obviously, if we can do that, then obviously the impact's going to be massive, I think, across the organisation.
Exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, and what really encompasses everything we're talking about here, relates to the fact that people generally will want to be well. Whether or not a non-well-being is a fallout of an organization and a time that we're in and a phase, whichever, most people's desired state would to be well. Now, whereas we used to think of well-being initiatives, for example, as being a nice to have, and it now is an essential because we've brought under the spotlight and firmly on the radar, to use mixed metaphors, the need for people to be well, because when people are well, they have more chance of being engaged. When people are engaged, they have more chance of being, higher level performers. If we've got people who are just there, we hear the words presenteeism, etc. There's no point in being there in your body if the mind and the capability that you have, the potential that you have, is not being fully utilized. So we've got to start with a well-being initiative that makes people feel more engaged and feel like they're actually moving forward, that will just by default make them feel good to have a knock-on effect with their physical and their mental well-being. It just happens to be a bit of a fallout that we might be a more successful, efficient organization as well. What's the benefit of doing this in terms of cost? Don't worry about that. But if you've got people who are engaged and performing, the bottom line will actually by default improve. Otherwise, there's some pretty bad financial planning that's gone on there. So I think that's a good start point, isn't it? let's make sure the emphasis is on people's well-being.
Definitely.
Yeah, that leads us on really nicely to we're going to move on to setting health and wellbeing goals now for the next year. So how can leaders help employees set and achieve meaningful wellness goals that support both personal and professional growth?
Okay. Do you want to talk about this one, Darren, or me?
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, I think it's one of those things that we need to think about in terms of that personal professional growth. We've got to think, well, actually, what are the things that we need to target here? And I know we've both discussed this in the past many times. I went and Mark about this,
Mm-hmm.
James Clear and Atomic Habits and that book. And it's a really great book in terms of figuring out, well, how do we build those really good habits that are going to serve us well? And how can we replace those habits that we kind of just fall into sometimes, because like we say, that prison of familiarity that you mentioned there before, because it's just kind of what we've always done. And I think we need to reframe that situation sometimes, and we need to really kind of really pinpoint where we want to go with this. So it's kind of finding those habits, and we'll discuss this I know later on in this discussion today, but it's thinking about those conscious choices that we can make. And I think that's the key thing. It's really bringing things to the fore, the things that we can control, the things that we can influence, the things that we can make a difference by, how we think about things. We have control over those things. And once we get to that level where we have that conscious choice about how we can improve our health and our well-being and these well-being goals that we have, because I think it's very easy to get caught up in the external noise and things going on around us. And we sometimes focus on, well, how did we end up and land in this place? If we didn't invite it, we didn't really do anything to encourage landing in a negative place, for example. But it's when we get there, it's thinking, well, okay, well, now I'm in this situation. What can I do to control this now? And once we start focusing internally rather than focusing our energy and our attention on the external that might have led us to this place that isn't that best place, or it might have put us into this negative habit that we might have, then we can start to really formulate a way to move forwards by putting into good practices, new habits that will really move us in a really positive direction, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned James Clear there, and I quite like his approach. People haven't read it. Atomic Habits has become quite a bestseller. It's suggesting that, and there's almost, should we go down the route of setting a clear goal? So, I mean, it's a very relevant question. What goal should we be setting? Well, at the end of the day, it's quite broad, isn't it? And I want to be well, I want to be engaged. It's going to mean different things to different people. But the thing that enables those goals to be achieved is our behaviors at a shorter scale. And James Clear's ideas are brilliant when it comes to lots of little cumulative habits will add up to increase the chance of the goal happening anyway. And I think the idea is that, yes, we need to have an aiming mark and a practical tool, to sort of be able to visualize it and to think about what I would like to happen in 6 months and a year's time. But, times change, things can move on. What is important is that the manageable period that I have is today or this next hour. What habits have I fallen into that are favorable, and what habits can I fall into that are unfavorable in terms of me achieving that? It's much more controllable to look at the things that I can drop in terms of bad habits and the things that I can start doing. Little things don't always happen at the beginning for the outcome, the reward ultimately. And a typical example is if we look at something like bad habits, positive, naughty but nice. I've got into habit of eating, a chocolate bar with my 11s every day. It's nice, and it gives me a bit of satisfaction. I know it's an immediate reward. But the danger there is that the ultimate reward, if I look down 6 months or a year's down the line, is that the cumulative effect of those chocolate bars at 11 o'clock are going to have a negative outcome on me. Bad habits are an immediate reward. And I think we've got to have a mentality now where we look at the good habits as not actually necessarily having an immediate effect. But, it just so happens that I get up in the morning and I go for a brisk walk. I always make sure that I don't drink coffee for an hour because it allows the various chemicals in my body to be cleared out before the coffee kicks in. It's a habit I get into that I personally, there's some good research on this, by the way, if you want to look at it. Don't have your first caffeine until an hour after. It's not immediate that that's going to have an impact, but the cumulative effect of me clearing out adenosine, as it happens, later on, the tangible benefit will happen later. And I think what we have to do is be aware that the good habits are cumulative and, in fact, manageable. So we can drop the bad ones today if we wanted to. We can start the bite-sized, manageable ones today also, and that's where I've got most control. Get those right, and there's a pretty good chance that somewhere down the line in 6 months or a year, those cumulative habits will actually help me achieve my well-being goal as well. So I think short, bite-sized, smart goals, the types of things that we all know from a point of view of our businesses are worth putting in place, but we need to apply these smart goals ourselves too, and
I
make
think
them
James
as.
Clear makes reference, does he, Mark, about, for example, if someone's got a goal to lose weight, and we
Yeah,
might start the new year with really good intentions and good habits, and then we don't see those immediate effects, and then
yeah,
we kind of or we kind of lose a little bit, then tail off a little bit before we go again. But it's like kind of just that accumulative impact, exactly like you say, that
mm,
consistency over time to get to those
mm.
longer term goals. And I think it's having that kind of resilience, isn't it, to make sure that we keep going with those things.
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah,
And then, yeah, on that slide there as well, we've got, I think that's kind of making reference, isn't it, Mark, about those making room for the good things and kind of, getting rid of the things that aren't serving as well necessarily. Thinking about
yeah,
those negative habits that we know we've all got them. We've all got them because they feel comfortable. And then, like you say, you might get those
yeah,
immediate rewards from it. But it's just
mm,
thinking about, well, what are the things that are serving me well that I can carry forwards with me? I can enhance, I can do more of, I can do them more frequently. And
yeah,
then really just being brutally honest with ourselves and thinking, well, what are the things that are holding me back? The things
yeah,
that I'm kind of holding on to because I've got that familiarity and it feels comfortable because again, it might be something I've always done. And
yeah,
I do health screening days an awful lot these days. And I was out the other day and I talked to loads of female perimenopausal females, and they're talking about, well, I used to be this way and I used to I used to do these things to lose weight. Well, actually, when our bodies change, I was speaking to a gentleman the other day as well, and he was saying, well, when I used to be in my 20s, I used to weigh this, and this is how I used to lose the weight, but now it doesn't work
mm,
anymore. And it's like,
mm.
well, your body's changed, so let's adapt with it and let's go with that, and let's kind of create this new version of yourself by doing new, different things and changing things up a little bit. So, yeah, I think decluttering, making that space for those good habits
Yeah,
is really,
absolutely.
really important.
No, I agree. It does make space. We can add lots of new things into the equation all the time, but the old idea of the sort of yesterday's best is today's average and tomorrow's mediocrity. If you don't use it, you lose it. There's a cycle of things that we bring in, and then the effect diminishes. The return on investment of that effort and time diminishes, and to learn how to drop those things with confidence, to make that space. At the end of the day, there's only at the end of the day, because again, mixing phrases here, but there's only 24 hours in that day. How much can we jam into it? I like the 80-20 rule idea here, because it suggests that 80% of the effect comes from 20% of the input. And we need to be in the right frame of mind, which is normally a reflective mind, to be able to choose what 20% will give us that return on investment of the 80. We don't want to be, busy fools of 80% effort on this, just getting 20% return on it because we haven't chosen well. We need to make space. So I agree. I think taking time to slow down, take things out of the equation, is absolutely crucial. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they sound like really good top wellbeing goals for staff, but is there anything else that you'd recommend as a wellbeing goal for staff in general?
Um,
Um,
Well, I'll take this one if you want, Mark. So I think on the next slide that we have hope, the one with the four pillars, it might be a relevant time to just put that one up now and just show that one. So
Mhm.
I think in terms of wellbeing goals, yeah, I think from a company-wide perspective, I think that's got to be based on information and feedback that you've had from people. So if we're talking about the gratitude and the feedback processes that we can't mention before, that will be a really, really integral source of information for you to build your wellbeing strategy upon and make sure that you're targeting the right things for your people within your organization. I think in terms of individual things as well, when we break that down to that personal level, I think the four pillars of health and well-being are really relevant. Thinking
mm,
about just taking that time to slow down, reflect, look inwardly, and kind of have that level of self-awareness, I think is crucial if we're going to get things right for us to move forwards in a really positive direction. So in
mm,
terms of emotions and mindsets, we're talking about how we see the world, how we're thinking about things, and asking yourself the question every now and then, how am I feeling at the moment? What things are eliciting emotions that aren't feeling that comfortable for me at the moment, and where do they come from? But I suppose unless we slow down and actually reflect on these things, we kind of just carry on sometimes with our heads down and find ourselves in a worse position than we were originally. But it gives us a real structure and framework, I think, to reflect on what's gone before, to then set ourselves up for success in the future, especially from a mindset point of view. In terms of movement and exercise, we think about how we can incorporate that into our days. Again, on my health screening days, I speak to so many people, and it sounds, when I have the conversation, life's very busy and I haven't got time for exercise. I don't have time for physical activity because we've got young kids, or I'm doing overtime, or this, whatever the reason is behind that, and they're all valid reasons. Don't get me wrong, they're valid reasons. But it's thinking about, well, rather than being exercise, movement, and physical activity being an addition to my life and being something that I tag on when I have the time, I think if we're going to be really impactful with that, it needs to be part of the fabric of who you are, like breathing, eating, sleeping, drinking, those kind of things. And I think when we think back to our ancestors and where we came from and how we're designed, and our DNA as human beings, we're designed to move. We're designed to be physically active because that's how our body works best. That's how we get ourselves to that thriving state where we can be that best version of ourselves. So I think that's a really good one as well, to kind of have that reflection and be really honest with yourself. I think the recommendations these days, I think, is 2.5 hours across the course of a week, minimum bouts of 10 minutes where we get our heart rate, temperature, and breathing rates up and keep it there. And then we can start to contribute towards that as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, bite-sized piece, Darren, I mean, a 5-minute brisk walk somewhere away from your home in the morning and back again. At lunchtime, a 5-minute walk somewhere and back again. After dinner in the evening, a brisk 5-minute walk somewhere and back again. It's 30 minutes times 5 is your 150 minutes. It's not, and that's been proven physiologically and psychologically to be beneficial. And that's a bite-sized, achievable aim, isn't it?
Exactly. I think it's just about making sure that when we're planning forwards and we're trying to set goals for the new year, we think, well, where am I at right now? And how did I get here? Because that's good information to then use to help us project forward. And if there were any issues, any barriers that cropped up, and we can kind of account for them moving forwards. But I think it's really important as well that we make this really personal to ourselves. Just because we know we should move and exercise. Well, what's your circumstances like at the moment? What are the things that are preventing, or are the opportunities which you can really make the most of? And when we start planning it out to that kind of level of detail, I think then it becomes way more impactful. I think, like we said on the previous couple of slides, where it's about making sure that they're things that we can stick to, things that are sustainable. I'm a huge believer in the marginal gains approach in terms of health and well-being. It's not about turning your life upside down and on its head and doing something that's not part of your normal routine and something that's different. I had a conversation with someone a while back, and it was a gentleman who was a little bit overweight, and he said, all right, I better get back to the couch to 5K. Then I'm like, oh, you enjoy running, do you? And he said, no, I don't. I hate running. So I'm like, well, when you get to the 5K and you've met your health and well-being goals, what happens next? Because if you're not going to go on to then carry on running, and afterwards, what are you going to do? And I think it's having those conversations internally with ourselves to think, how can I set these things up for my goal setting? And what are the parameters and the processes and the conditions I need to put on to make sure that these things are impactful in the now, the here and now, but also things that they can then be sustainable, not just for the next few months, but throughout the rest, throughout my lifetime, I suppose. And that's how we get the impact.
And it's how we fuel it as well, Darren. I mean, the nutrition thing now is setting goals for how we eat for the next coming year. Well, again, let's bring it down to what we do today. Bad habits we know from a nutrition point of view, but looking at the sheer quantity of processed and ultra processed foods that are in our diet now, having an impact on our overall longevity, on our mortality. We are what we eat, and setting realistic goals there. It's in place. We know what we should be eating. We should be eating natural whole foods that our ancestors have given us the capacity to digest. It's too easy to eat. I think we need to set some realistic goals there. And it's not difficult. Let's face it.
I think in terms of frameworks, Mark. I think in terms of frameworks, sorry to put in there. I think in terms of frameworks, some people like a process, don't they, as well? So things like SMART targets are fantastic. So once you know what it is that you want to work on, right, well, how are you going to put this into process? So picking something specific, something that's measurable, achievable, realistic. I know that people use different words for the R1 and SMART targets sometimes, and time bound. And I suppose having that structure and that framework to then build your targets on, again, it's one of those things that it can keep you focused, it can keep you on track, it can keep you targeted towards where it is that you actually want to get to in the end, and it gives you that real process. If you like a
Sure.
process, like me, I love a process.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if you like a process and that gives you that framework to hang it on, then I think that's a really positive thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, all of these things, there are the pillars. I'm just conscious of time, and sort of we need to be thinking about when do we do it. Well, look, now is the
Yeah.
good time. The old sigmoid curve idea, and I love this. This was Charles Handy years ago, looked at the mathematical relationship between time and success. It's going to go through a sort of an S-shaped curve. In the early stages, our success in something that's measured is going to go down because it's new to us. It's like riding a bicycle. We're not going to be a perfect bicycle rider, to begin with. But then we get momentum. But if we start or carry on doing the same thing for too long, then our relative performance and success is going to go down. We reach point B, if you like, on the. It's going to be hard to pull our socks up and move onwards and upwards. When we've got momentum, when things are good, when we finish the year on a positive note, then actually is a good time to reflect and bring in these new practices. And we take our sigmoid curve with us, and it'll take us beyond the point that we would have got on the old curve, by literally finding when we've got momentum. And life should be a series of jumping onto the new curve. We can do it daily, but let's use this period as a way of adopting a new behavior. Let's use this reflective period now of being able to say, I'm slowing down, I'm being reflective over this period. What do I need to do to move on to my new curve? And those 4 areas that we showed earlier on, are a good start point. Let's set the goals, let's set the habits, practical things that we can do, in terms of, I suppose, tools. We want to move towards a desired state. We've got towards and away from motivation. If we're moving towards a desired state, we produce a whole series of different chemicals in the body, compared to if we're always aware of what we don't want to achieve. What we're always thinking, oh, if I don't do this, this is going to happen. If I don't run, I'm going to put the weight on it. These are negative things that bring in a degree of negative chemicals as well, and cortisol and adrenaline is going to be abundant if we're always aware of what we don't want. So moving towards what we want, visualizing them. That's a fantastic technique. We've both worked in professional sport for many years. A huge tool to use is to see yourself being successful. Let's visualize how we want it to be and visualize us doing those habits each day. It's a very powerful tool to use to move us and onto the next curve, because we can see what it looks like. Let's have a think about planning for this, this next period. The types of things that we need to bring in, to bring on. Yeah.
Amazing, thank you. So finally, we're going to be talking about planning for January wellbeing programs. So what are some key components of a successful workplace wellbeing program?
Okay, well, we've talked about it, but I think at the end of the day, a lot of it has to do with health leadership. If we are influential in our leadership approach, we will have followership that comes naturally. And if we are setting example, if we're walking the talk, if we're doing those things ourselves as good practice, then we've got more chance of people following. And I think health and well-being leadership is absolutely key. I think the other thing that we need to think about is bringing in this degree of emotional intelligence that we've talked about. How we feel. As a psychotherapist, I spend a lot of time asking people how things are, and they'll give me a load of facts, and I'll say, yeah, but how does it make you feel? What are the feelings associated with that? And as soon as we tap into a more emotional intelligence, it's actually going to help us drive towards those desired states. So, for me, I definitely think health leadership, leading by example, bringing in emotions, and it's okay to talk emotions. We know this from a mental health point of view. Yeah. I don't know, Darren, your thoughts on, yeah.
Yeah, I remember having a conversation with an ex-colleague a while back, and gave a real good kind of few different ideas for how we can get this up and running and get a really detailed program. And I think first thing is it's got to be visible. It's got to be something, and I go out into organisations, on a weekly basis, and I see different things in different organisations, and the ones where I'm having the conversation with people that are people who are really moving, and I get the impression that the organisation is as well. Is having that visibility to make sure that everyone's aware of everything that's going on within your organisation from a wellbeing point of view. So it might be a poster on the wall, it might be weekly messages, daily messages built into meetings, whatever it might be, but making sure that we've got that. I think making sure there's a variety of things going on, so it's not a one size fits all, is really important as well. because we all learn differently. We've all got different kind of agendas. We've all got different priorities. We've all got different time constraints in what we're doing. So having that variety there, but also having that level of versatility as well. So for example, today we're doing this on a webinar. It might be that you invite somebody in to do a face-to-face workshop or whatever it might be. So it's matching what you're offering to the audience that you have, and thinking maybe about the working conditions of people. You know, we a lot of organizations still have people working from home. So, well, if there's someone on site in the building and they live in a different city, well, that's probably not going to be practical. So offering that difference is already really important as well. I think creating a sense of community as well is very important. I think making people feel like they're part of something. So rather than it being a standalone activity that one person can engage in with themselves. And I think one of the most impactful things I've had in the last few years was I used to go into Westfield when he's coming 2 days a week and go and join in the gym sessions, and I'd be next to the CEO and the senior staff doing some circuit training and helping each other, you know, kind of spotting each other on the weights and things, and those kind of things. You know, getting that level of community where everybody feels like they're engaged. And I think as well, if you're getting your leadership team involved in this and you're getting your line managers involved in this as well, and they're seen to be engaging in it, even small things like somebody leaving the office, like one of the senior managers leaving the office in their gym gear. I think that's a really positive and purposeful message as well. So I think
make it very visible,
versatile, visible, varied. You know, we're going through creating community, having that where we start from the top and have that leadership culture. I think that's a really great way to kind of start to really embed these processes into an organisation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's some great tips to ensure participation in January wellness initiatives. I like that. So thank you so much for your knowledge and time today. It's been a really insightful discussion with so much to take away. Although if you were to narrow it down to one key takeaway for our audience from today's session, what would that be?
All right. Well, look, we haven't talked about it, but one thing that I think ties all this together, if it's about understanding how we are within this process, one of the things I'm recommending more and more to people, and I certainly do myself, is I write things down on a piece of paper. You know, I journal. And I think taking the time to actually write something physically on a piece of paper, which is quite unusual actually these days, is something which allows the whole process to start slow down, and for us to think and be aware of these things. But more importantly, when you write it down, not only you get setting different centers of the brain into some sort of a mode to remember it much better, but you can reflect back on it. You can learn more about yourself. So I would say if you're going to do something different today, out of all the areas that we've talked about, why not think about journaling? And there's some fantastic journals you can buy now, sometimes just blank pages. I think that will make a difference, certainly for a lot of people. Why not think about asking and putting on your Christmas list a journal? It works. There's no doubt about it. We've done it for thousands of years, writing things down. That's my tip.
Thank you.
Yep, and I think one for goal and target setting is to really think about it carefully and put your time and energy into the right things that will get you moving in a positive direction. So whether that be aligning with your values, your beliefs, whatever it might be, whether that be something in your personal life that's going to really give you a solid foundation for you to thrive in the workplace, or the other way around. But I think it's really making sure that it's the thing that when you put your efforts into it, you are going to get a great return on that investment by making sure you prioritize the right things for you, given the circumstances you find yourself in, and not just kind of because it sounds like the right thing to do, something that is actually going to make a big difference to you, I think.
Sure. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you, chaps. So we are now coming to the end of our webinar. So thank you to everyone for taking the time to join, and to our panelists for sharing their expertise. We're sorry that we didn't get a chance to answer all of your questions, but we'll do some follow-up blogs on our website to try and cover some of the common topics. Please don't forget to download the handouts, and you'll also receive an email shortly with the recording of the webinar. We'd appreciate your feedback via our survey that will appear on your screen. And if you'd like to speak with one of our health and wellbeing consultants about supporting wellbeing in your organisation, either speak to your account manager if you have one, or you can contact us by email at businessinquiries@westfieldhealth.com. Thank you.